like to introduce some of the members of the town hall and boards in attendance. If those in attendance could either raise their hands or stand up when their name is called, everyone will be able to put to some names to faces, particularly me, since I'm still learning a lot of people in town. So I'm just going to run through those, and I would appreciate that. For the select board, David Swenson, the chair. You don't have to stand up, Dave, but he's on the thing. Dorothy Vizel, vice chair. She has an excused absence. Ron Uliano, selectman. Thank you, Ron. Cecile Chase, she is the selectman pro tem, standing in for vice chair Vizel. The town administrator, Nicole Zolko. Town clerk, Alicia Hozo. Sorry, I can't ever pronounce the names. Town council, Naomi Butterfield, Esquire. She's going to keep us honest. For the budget committee, Terry Jarvis, chair. Mark Sullivan, vice chair. Mark Dekoff, member. Ken Fanjoy, member. Rudy Rosiello, member. Joan Swenson, member. She has an excused absence, I believe. Dave Swenson, Board of Selectmen rep. Planning board is Jeff Allard, chair. He will be speaking as to the planning board and zoning ordinances. I'd like to also say a few words about tonight's goals before we review the rules of the road. The town deliberative session is the opportunity for all interested registered voters in town to participate in discussing, amending, and finalizing by in-person popular vote this evening the slate of articles which will appear on our town warrant. The deliberative session is not a select board or budget committee meeting, although the members will have an open recess meeting during this session. The select board and budget committee members are participating as registered voters, just as you and I. This is your opportunity to ask questions and make changes to warrant articles. If you don't understand something or need any clarification, please ask. You won't be asking me, there's going to be somebody who knows the answer that will answer you. This is your opportunity to ask questions and make changes to warrant articles. Actual voting on the warrants will take place on Tuesday, March 8th from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. at the New Durham School. Please be aware we are limited in what we may do tonight. We may amend or modify, but we may not change the subject matter of any article. In the case of zoning articles, we cannot amend or modify. Discussion will be limited to what can be done at the meeting, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't ask questions to make sure you understand the proposed articles. We will not be voting to put articles on the warrant, merely voting on whether the articles will move to the official ballot as is or as amended. Each article will be introduced, moved to the floor, and seconded, and then the appropriate person will provide a brief explanation of the article. Members of the public will then be allowed to speak as they are recognized by the moderator. Once discussion of an article has been concluded, if a written amendment has been proposed and seconded, there will be a hand count vote. If the amendment passes, that version of the article will appear on the town warrant. If it fails, the original article will be used. We will then move on through each article in turn until all articles have been debated and resolved. I will make a few closing remarks before ending the deliberative session and turning things over to members. I'm now going to go over the rules of order that we have. Warrant articles considered tonight will be introduced by the moderator, and the initial speaker recognized will be a member of the Board of Selectmen, the Planning Board, or, if filed by petition, a town voter. The voters in attendance will be provided with copies of the town warrant for the meeting. The moderator is tasked with conducting the meeting, fielding questions from voters, and facilitating any debate. Warrant articles presented by the Planning Board are governed by New Hampshire statutes, which contain public hearing provisions. Debate on the Planning Board related articles go directly to ballot and are not able to be amended by the voters at today's deliberative session. Discussion is allowed and questions may be answered by Planning Board members. All other warrant articles are subject to the deliberative session procedures. For today's deliberative session, we will not be using Robert's rules, but we're using the moderator's rules of respect, courtesy, and common sense. Each article, when announced, will be acted upon as follows. The presenter of a warrant article is allowed up to 10 minutes to discuss the article. Debate will be encouraged from the voters present. To speak, you must be recognized by the moderator. And at that point, you go to the microphone and state your name and address. All speakers will be limited to 3 minutes. Only after all speakers have been heard may a speaker be recognized for a second time. Warrant articles may be amended from the floor. However, any amendments must be in written form and presented to the moderator. Amendments must be made by motion and require a second to be considered. If carried, amendments will be placed on the ballot in lieu of the original article. If the amendment does not carry, the original warrant article will be on the ballot. At the conclusion of the above procedures for a given warrant, the moderator will move on to the next warrant article. Only one amendment will be allowed at any one time. Amendments to amendments and negative amendments are not allowed. Amendments to financial amounts must be stated in dollar amounts to be accepted. Voter cards will be raised by voters when voting, when voting on amendments. Closed votes will be counted by assistance to the moderator. Warrant articles do not require a motion to be passed on to the voters, and they are automatically presented as written or amended by the voters at today's meeting to the 8 March ballot session of the town meeting. Okay. So I guess we've gone through all of that, and I think we are ready to actually start reviewing the articles. Is everybody ready? Okay. Let's begin with the first article, which lists town openings and candidates for each post. If you are here today and your name is called, would you please either raise your hand or stand up so those in attendance can see who you are? Okay, let me get my list. Hang on a second. Okay. There is one position open for a 3-year term for selectmen. Those candidates are Ron Uyeno and Mark Deepak. There is one position open for selectmen, a 1-year term. Those on the ballot are David Swenson and Rudy Rosiello. There is one position open for town moderator for 2 years. That would be me. If someone else wants the job, see me afterwards and we can discuss it. One position for town clerk for 3 years. Alicia Hozel? You know, in a couple of years I'll get it right. 2 positions for budget committee for a 3-year term. Ellen Phillips in the audience, and David Bickford. Awesome. One position open for the John C. Shirley Cemetery Trustee for 3 years. There is nobody that is listed, so we're looking for writing candidates, so someone has some time. 2 positions for a library trustee for 3 years. Patrice Mitchell. Okay, and John Michaud. One position open for planning board for 3 years. You are a write-in, yes. And so that can't be really done at this session. Yeah. But candidates night is coming up, so put it on your dance card. One position for supervisor of the checklist for 6 years. Patricia Grant.
And just to know, it's got a T on the end?
Yes.
I'm Grant, but not Grant enough.
One position for trustee of trust funds, 3 years. Again, we're looking for writing candidates. And 2 positions open for the zoning board of adjustment for 3 years. Stuckey, Linda Calloway is one, and we're looking for write-ins for the other position. Okay, so now we get down to the real meat of here. The first article is Article 2 that we're going to consider, and that is one of the planning board articles, the zoning board. Jeff, would you like to make a motion to bring this forward? Would you like me to read the article, or are you good reading it, or do you just want to just discuss it?
Why don't I just present the salient points?
That would be great. Just make sure you're at the microphone and you're loud.
Can I turn the microphone around so I can speak?
You may.
Okay. So,
Is this actually working?
Can I pull it out?
Let's do that. Or, no. No, it's not good. It does not make it.
Okay, Lucy.
Hold on. Yeah, I think I'm about to undo it from the floor, actually. We'll just have to deal with that.
Take your basketball.
Yeah.
See, here you go.
Or just take the mic out of the
Pick it up.
stand. Take the mic out of the stand.
Pick the whole thing up. Pick the stand up and hold it.
I'm a rock star, man. Let's see if we can't just take
They
it.
don't screw, so just pick the whole thing up. Pick the whole thing up.
Oh,
Easier.
this guy. Oh, my God.
Stop.
Does that now work?
No, you need to turn it up.
Jeff, if you want to use my microphone, if you want to come and stand here, that's fine.
That, whoop, now it's working.
Oh.
All right. I will keep this brief, given the 5 minutes of technical difficulties. Very busy year for the planning board this year. In addition to the flurry of building activity that has gone on in town, which has led to a much higher number of applications than we typically see. And in addition to that, we revised our impact fees this year. Impact fees are what we charge for a new building in order to support our school systems. And we actually revised those downward because the number of children going to school has been consistently decreasing, and that ultimately leads to a decreased need for impact fees. We revised our soil types. I think everyone knows that we use soil-based lot sizing in town. So when you subdivide your land, the minimum lot size is actually dependent on the soil types. And soil types change over time, and so some of our builders and landowners have had trouble trying to figure out what exactly is the soil type. So we revised all that. We were awarded a PREPA grant, and I can't tell you the acronym for PREPA. It's Piscataqua Regional Estuary something. I've forgotten the PA, but it's ultimately a federal grant, and we were awarded a $10,000 grant to work with the Stratford County Regional Planning Commission to help us with revisions to our zoning ordinance, primarily concerned, of course, with water bodies and buffers to water bodies. On to Article 2. So we spent a year and a half working on the Shorefront Conservation Overlay District. So if you don't know this, and probably you don't, and why would you? There are, in our zoning ordinance, there are 2 zoning districts in town. So there's the town center mixed use district, and then there's the residential agricultural district, which is everything other than the town center. And then we have overlay districts. And that's for districts where there are special considerations, like wetlands or steep slopes. So we have additional requirements for those kinds of lands. One of our overlay districts is the shorefront, and it's all land that is within 300 feet of a water body. And there's been a huge amount of building, and particularly demolition on the waterfront and rebuilding. And so we're trying to just control that and regulate that in a way that's fair to homeowners and landowners, but in a way that protects our water bodies as well. So the suggestions, well, first of all, we had an incredible amount of help. The zoning board in particular, Linda, participated, Stephanie Richards, Terry attended many of our meetings, and Paul Roslavicus as well, put in an enormous amount of time on this. So we started actually in 2020 with a committee between the zoning board and the planning board. We brought suggestions to the planning board, who formulated specific language, and we followed that with 7 public hearings. So we actually were open to the public on 7 nights at the planning board. And here's what we came up with. What we'd like to change, everyone's aware the maximum height in town is 35 feet. But it's 35 feet measured from what we call the average parent grade. And the average, if you're on a very steep slope, becomes a problem. Because if you're on a flat piece of land, the house is now 35 feet tall. If you've got a very steep pitch and you go to the average, you could now add 10 or even 15 feet to that 35 feet. from the lowest point. So now your lowest point could be 40, 45, 50 feet, and this has happened in town. So we wanted to clarify that, and we made the maximum. We added in a 50-foot waterfront buffer. This is mandated by the state. Our problem is that the state is not very good at enforcing their requirements. They lack the manpower and the funding. And so we added in essentially the state language that waterfront properties would require a 50-foot waterfront buffer. And then we came up with a set of criteria for demolishing and rebuilding properties. And we said you would have to maintain the existing square footage. You would need to move the building, the home, back as far as possible. That could be the 20-foot setback from the road, it might be a cliff, it might be a boulder, whatever it is. But if the structure can be moved back, then that is required. But you may reconfigure. So if you've got an 800 square foot footprint, and now you want to tear that down and rebuild, you move it back, you can reconfigure it any way you want. You don't have to maintain the actual dimensions of the footprint. And you can have a basement, and you can have 2 stories of living space. So we think that's pretty generous, but at the same time, protects our water bodies. We require parking for 4 vehicles, or would if this is adopted by you, the voters. There's a lot of problems around our waterfront properties with parking in the summertime and lots of cars in the road. Everyone has friends and family coming up. So we would require 4 parking spaces, and all building within 75 feet, which is our waterfront buffer in town, all building within 75 feet of the water would require a conditional use permit from the planning board. And the reason is we want to see a stormwater management plan. When water comes sheeting off the land directly into the lake or ponds or rivers or whatever it is, it carries all the pollutants with it. If it goes down into the earth, then it gets filtered and clarified. So we want to see a stormwater management plan. So on the ballot, when you come in to vote, that will be a warrant article. And there will actually be another vote on the ballot. We're going to change it slightly between now and not any of the content, just the format on the ballot. And it will be that we would like to propose that deviations. I don't think that's me.
If you hold it closer, he doesn't have to have it in his lap.
Oh, okay. All right. So we'd like to also require that deviation, typically from the zoning ordinance. If you need relief from the zoning ordinance, you request a variance of the zoning board. A variance has generic criteria that apply to all sections of the zoning ordinance. What we are proposing is a special exception, and the difference is that a special exception only applies to a specific section of the zoning ordinance. So in this case, we can fashion unique criteria specific to building on the waterfront. And so we're recommending that we use the special exception, and we develop those criteria. So that will actually be a second vote. And then can I go on to Article 3, or do you need to announce that?
No, there was no amendment, so that was the discussion. Feel free to go on to Article 3.
Okay. So Article 3 will remain as a single vote, and this is primarily changes to Article 21 in our zoning ordinance, which deals with non-conforming properties. And the main reason that we went into this is that there were inconsistencies. Every time you change one thing in the zoning ordinance, it dominoes into other sections of the ordinance. And we wanted to clean up some things where that had happened in the past. And one of those was that we had 50 feet, which is the state waterfront setback. In New Durham, the waterfront setback is 75 feet. And so we wanted to fix that and change it from consistently throughout the ordinance so that it always said 75 feet. And there was a lot of discussion about the addition of a deck within 50 feet, which we thought was allowed by the state. But one of our members of the public very astutely found that the state doesn't really allow that. They allow that only on structures constructed prior to 1994. And so we simply eliminated that section of the zoning ordinance. And we also clarified that previously in the zoning ordinance, the setback for leach fields from water was, it is town-wide 125 feet. But for non-conforming properties, we allowed 75 feet. We couldn't see a good reason to continue with 75 feet. We felt it ought to be 125 feet. That's what optimally protects our water bodies. There are properties where you can't do 125 feet, and that's what the Zoning Board of Adjustment is for. And if that's necessary, people can go before the CPA. So those are the changes that we have proposed, primarily or all dealing with building and rebuilding on waterfront properties. Any questions? If not, we will move along.
Okay, thank you very much, Jeff.
You bet.
Is this working? Is mine working?
Not real loud.
Hello? Oh, there you go. Okay. The mask was a little bit far away. Okay. Next, we're going to move on to Article 4. Swins, I think, was supposed to discuss this. Did you want me to read the article, or are you happy just taking it over, Swins?
Why don't you read the article, and then I'll comment on it as the initial speaker.
Okay, hang on one second, because I am never prepared.
You do awesome when you're doing this.
Okay, Article 4. Shall the town raise and appropriate as an operating budget, not including appropriations by special warrant articles and other appropriations voted separately, the amounts set forth on the budget posted with the warrant or as amended by the vote of the first session, for the purposes set forth therein totaling $3,552,150. Should this article be defeated, the default budget shall be $3,435,494, which is the same as last year, with certain adjustments required by previous action of the town or by law. Or the governing body may hold a special meeting in accordance with RSA 40, 13, 10, and 14, sections 10 and 14, to take up the issue of a revised operating budget only. Majority vote is required. Are people interested in hearing that tax rate impact on each of these? No? Okay, I will turn this over to Swen. You have 10 minutes to say what you would like to say.
Okay, I don't think we'll take that long, but just to provide some background and some comments to it, and then I'm actually going to turn it over to Budget Chair Jarvis after I'm finished here. So just kind of a couple of things in background. During 2021, actually started in late 2020, and during the early parts of 2021, the first 4 or 5 months, the Select Board did develop a rather extensive compensation philosophy, which we operationally implemented in the early parts of 2021. And we tried to do several things. One is to make it market competitive primarily, and secondly, to make sure that a proper compensation is there to attract and retain the employees. In fact, Pro-Town Selectman Chase was instrumental in helping the Select Board develop that, along with the other Select Board members, Don Faisal and myself. With that background, because I think we all understand that we are in somewhat of a inflationary period, that has affected that part of it during 2021, and we anticipate and project that as part of our budget for FY 2022. And in fact, that is the primary driver, I think, for most of the increases that we see in FY 2022 compared to FY 21. However, it should be noted that the tax rate still remains, at least the most recent tax rate that you received in December and I think by early mid-January, still is lower rate per thousand than it was 6, 8, 10 years ago. Now, of course, the offset to that is that property values have gone up, and we've all benefited from that. Benefited from that. I think very quickly, if you have the slide without the blue background, which has all of the budget on it, put that slide up if it's not already. You can see that all of the line items are presented. You'll see that it's compared with 21 and also the 22 budget is compared with the default budget. A couple of general key points here that should be noted is that those wage adjustments caused by both market conditions and inflation conditions have been the primary driver in much of those changes in various accounts which have employees attributed to them. A couple of other examples which may or may not be directly to the wage side of it. Account 4140, election registrations. There are multiple elections in 2022. And not only that, I think most are aware that we've had some issues with being able to use the school. We appreciate being able to use it tonight. We will be able to use it for March and November elections. September we're still working on. But that has, because of the mask mandates in the school, caused us an extra $3,700.22 for providing for those individuals that choose not to be masked at the various voting and sessions, select deliberative session. Another account 4240, which is the building inspector. I think we've all seen 21, before that, certainly in 21, major construction, renovation, all those kind of things, building improvements going up. Similarly, accompanying that oftentimes are enforcement actions to make sure that the codes are properly adhered to in those renovations and construction. So that you'll see in 4240, the building inspector, an increase for increased hours, increased skill sets, etc. for that department. 4324, solid waste. You'll see also the reasonably substantial increase in that additional hauling and other solid waste costs, as well as the wage comments that I made earlier. Similarly, comment for 4312, public works, the wage comments apply there. Similarly, budget. And then, again, there's a few other points on that you can see both in the voter guide, and you'll see in a subsequent slide, which we'll skip over quite quickly, but accounts 4711 and 4721. There was a reduction in that, we did retire one of the bonds that we had. That was a substantial reduction, which offsets some of the increases. A couple of just kind of general comments. The FY22 town operating budget, as proposed by the budget committee of $3,552,150, is higher than the 21 voted approved town operating budget by $326,816, or about 10.13%. 22 default operating budget of $3,435,494 is higher than the 21 approved operating budget by $210,160, or about 6.5%. However, it should be noted that the difference between the proposed 2022 operating budget and the 2022 default budget is about 3.4%, or $116,657. The real question for taxpayers and voters is, okay, that's the operating budget, but there are more things that go into the tax rates than the operating budget, which is certainly true. Outside of town, of course, there's a school, which is about 60 to 65% of the total tax rates. And then there's a state education and accounting part of the tax rates. However, dealing with only the town portion now, but adding all of the other warrant articles that we have for the capital reserve funds, expendable trust funds, CRS, ETFs, etc., and making the assumption that those are approved. It should be noted that that combination of the total, you'll see it at the end of the voter guide in the table that's in the appendix, but as shown that the net change in total cost to the taxpayer should all of those 22 operating budgets, CRS and ETFs, pass. The voters, it moves the tax rate from $5.01 in 2021 to $5.11 in 2022. The reason you see that difference in what's presented in warrant number 4 is that there are revenue offsets, such as motor vehicles, property tax, motor vehicles, permits, other things that reduce that tax. So the bottom line here from an overall perspective is, while 2022 certainly is higher than 21, if you look at it from a combined point of view, we're talking about 1.96%, which is less than the cost of inflation. So, I mean, kind of introductory comments there. Chair Jarvis, I'm going to turn it over to you and then open for the floor for what other comments or questions may have.
Along with the items that Chair Swenson highlighted as being drivers in the increase, it's important to remember whenever we increase salaries, all of the associated costs, such as FICA, workers' comp, everything else also increased accordingly. We also had increases in our health, dental, and disability insurances this year. The proposed FY22 budget also reflects the money or funding for Monday through Friday coverage by the fire department. New Durham Fire Department, like every other fire department around, is struggling to find members. And this will pay for coverage for, we're hoping, somewhere between 8 to 12 hours. Chief Varney is preparing proposals and gathering other data to present fully to the Board of Selectmen. The budget also reflects an across-the-board pay raise of $5 per hour for the members of the fire department. And part of those fundings will come from federal funds, but the money, Chief Varney has assured us that there will be sufficient funds for both of those activities in the budget that he presented to us. Every department is suffering from an increase in the cost of oil, electricity, gas, diesel, just like we all are. Just because we're a town doesn't mean that those prices don't go up. Unfortunately, both the planning board and the zoning board have had to call upon the assistance of legal counsel more this year for a variety of different reasons. So the legal budget has also gone up. Our building inspector has been given additional hours. He is still a part-time employee, but he's been given additional hours for work, so that not only is he doing building work, he has additional hours for code enforcement activities, some of which Chair Allen referred to as some of the issues going on up at the lake. I'd be happy to answer the specific questions to the best of my ability, or the rest of the committee can answer them.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Terry. The floor is now open for questions. If someone would like to have a question or a comment, please raise your voting card. I'll recognize you to go to the microphone so we don't have a stampede. And when you get up, please clearly state your name and address.
My name is Janice Anthes. I live at 103 Meterboro Road. And my question is, does the fire department's budget include a reappointment of the fire chief and at maybe a higher rate of pay, because he is terribly low? If you've done a wage analysis, you can see that. So I'm wondering if this budget includes that.
The Budget Committee has no authority over the hiring, firing, promotion, or demotion of any town employee. That is an activity that belongs, the sole purview is within the Board of Selectmen. Pay raises would also be determined by the Board of Selectmen. We do have an account, 4155, which is personnel administration, and the Board of Selectmen and the Budget Committee have included funds there should pay raises be warranted.
Thank you, Terry. Anyone else have a question? Dave, please go on up and state your name and address and go to town.
My name is David Bickford from 183 Bracket Road. I did want to point out that we have heard about the tax rate trends in New Durham. I looked at the graph on page 28 of the voter's guide. What I don't think is happening here, I don't think we're being shown the adjustment for assessments. So every 5 years, by Constitution of New Hampshire, we have to do another assessment to adjust for the, either the increase in property value or decrease in property values. So if that was added in there, I think we'd have a very different looking chart before us. And that's critical to have that in here, otherwise it's just misinformation. I think Janet Ante's question probably should have been directed to the selectmen rather than the budget committee. And one other point is, I didn't hear too much about revenue. It's my understanding that we get a lot of revenue from the state and even the federal government, I think, this year, and we expect even more next year. So it wasn't all bad news, the expenses and such. Now, when I went before, I tried to get legal information of what the costs were of legal, and it was very difficult. I did finally get it. I found that $5,400 was spent to get the property next door to Cecile Chase here cleaned up. That was just the legal cost. I don't know what the other costs were for the building inspector. But if I had so much trouble getting it, that means the budget committee didn't get it. If they're not getting that kind of information, detailed information, are we really making informed decisions? Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak to this article number 4?
You want to have a slide answer?
Go ahead. There's no other speakers that want to speak, correct? Okay.
103 Wolfeboro Road. I'll aim my question at the select board then. Are you going to reappoint Peter Barney as police chief? And in your thinking about personnel administration, did you add a pay raise for him? Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, let me make the initial comments and get select board members to make changes also. First of all, I think the question is a little bit beyond the purview of the deliberative session, but just to respond, Fire Chief Barney remains the fire chief at this time, and any increase in pay will be a decision from the select board. There has been money, only 40 to 55 personal administration. I think it was referenced by Chair Jarvis and others that the select board made a rather significant increase in all of the wages for all of the fire departments. So I think that was a very positive response to meet some market needs. So I think in general that responds, I think, to the question.
Okay, if there are no other questions, I'm going to go ahead and move on to Article 5. Article 5, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $400,000 for the purposes of road program, with $111,095 to come from the highway block grant aid and $288,905 to come from general taxation. Cecile, would you like to speak to this article?
I certainly can.
Thank you.
Once again, the Budget Committee and the Select Board are paying close attention to the conditions of the roads in New Durham. In 2021, besides the regular road maintenance, there was a $387,000 investment into Birch Hill Road. The 2022 budget, while lower than 2021 because it does not include that Birch Hill Road project, is still larger than any road budget over the last 10 years. The roads in New Durham are our most significant asset, and it's important that we pay close attention to that. Out of the cost of the $400,000 that's being appropriated, $111,095 is coming from the state highway block grant, and the remainder of $288,905 will come from general taxation.
Thank you. I'll go ahead and open this up to the floor for questions and comments. Do I have anyone that would like to ask a question or make a comment? Okay. Thank you very much. I'm going to go ahead and move on to Article 6. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $210,000 to be placed in previously established public works related capital reserve funds as follows, with said funds to come from taxation. Would people like me to go ahead and read the chart so you get all the numbers and whatever?
Yes, please.
Oh, okay, we have a yes. Highway equipment, $60,000. Highway trucks, $75,000. Vehicle and equipment maintenance, $10,000. Solid waste equipment, $25,000. And road reconstruction for $40,000 to make the $210,000 total. Would anyone like to make any comments or ask any questions? That's right, blue card. Okay, go ahead, Dave.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. My name is David Bedford, 183 Brackett Road. My concern is the number of capital reserve funds that have been mingled together. Now, in 2019, the town took a vote, Article 13, said that in the future, capital reserve funds and expendable trust funds will be listed and voted on individually on the town warrant. The vote was 234 to 151, and yet we haven't got this. And yet all the towns around us do it that way. Why we have to be abnormal, I don't know. But I am going to give this to the attorney to look at, see if there was anything illegal about what the town voted on in 2019. Now, in the year 2020, the selectmen decided to commingle these funds, 3 of the funds. And there was the Smith Ball Field, there was the public safety facility, and there was the 1772 meeting house restoration. And I think people didn't want the restoration, that $25,000 restoration. So they ended up having to vote the whole thing down. So we lost $20,000 out of our public safety building because of that. And so now what do? We have to come back and make that money back up later on. If we did it individually, like we always do, like all other towns do around us, we wouldn't have that problem. That article lost 138 to 159 because of incompetence. This is no need of, we've talked about this, and the town has made their choice and said this is the way we want it done. So I don't understand why it can't continue. You would not commingle your capital reserve funds in your account. They have to be kept separately. I don't understand why they would be commingled when we vote on them. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Moderator Calloway,
Yes? Yes?
perhaps I can make a couple of comments to those.
Thank you.
First of all,
Good.
just to clarify so we clearly understand from a financial point of view, those funds are not commingled.
I didn't say it would. I said you wouldn't.
Number 2 is that the vote in 2019, as has been legally advised, was an advisory vote, not a binding vote, as Mr. Bickford knows, I believe. And the third point is that this deliberative session, if you have an objection as an example to any single member, you could very easily place an amendment to the moderator in writing and have it come before the deliberative session for a change of that number. So there are a variety of ways that changes can be made in that area. And again, just to clarify on the commingle, these funds are not commingled. Number 2, as I said, was an advisory vote. And there are ways to modify the number if you felt it appropriate.
Go ahead, Mr. Baker.
Thank you, Ms. Moderator. All right. First of all, do you know what the word advisory means?
Yes, we do.
You gotta talk to the moderator.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, you have to yell at me.
Okay.
Okay. We're good.
He says it's advisory. That's right. Good. Now do what you're advised to do. As far as coming here and doing an amendment, I discussed that with the moderator, and she didn't feel we could do that. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
Are there any other comments or questions or? Okay,
So
Cecile?
I do have a question, and this is for town council. So I think a question was asked if any of these individual lines could be modified, and I'd like your opinion on that.
Yeah, if anybody wants to propose an amendment that modifies any of these lines, that's appropriate at the deliberative session. We'd have a second, and then this group would vote as to whether to modify this so that it would appear on the ballot with a modified amount. But that is permissible at the deliberative session. The only thing you can't change is the zoning article. Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, go ahead. Yes.
Yeah, he did it in the microphone.
Sorry, yes, the only things you can't change here are zoning articles, but if you want to modify any one of these line items, you can't change the subject of a warrant article, but you can change the amounts in the warrant article. And so if anybody is moved to do so, you propose a motion, someone seconds it. If everybody here votes to amend that amount, it will appear as the amended amount on the ballot.
That's not the issue we're talking about. The issue is not the amount of money in it, is that we get to vote on each capital reserve fund.
Could you use the microphone, please?
I understand that. I was responding to the question that I was specifically asked. I understand your point was different.
Oh, okay.
So the bottom line would be, although this does not address your actual issue as far as them all being lumped in, although they come from separate funds, they're showing up on the same article in the ballot, you do have the option to say, in this one item, say you have some, you don't like trucks, okay? So you can go in and say $75,000 is way too much for a truck, get a Toyota, and I only want to put $60,000. You could put a written amendment and it would change the amount on that and it could be voted on. So for these type articles, until whatever is resolved with your issue, if you think that people are not voting for things due to some item being too much or too little, this is the session where you could go ahead and propose an amendment for one of those amounts. It would be voted on by those present, and then it would be put to a vote. If it passes, it would go, again, as a block, it would go forward with the different amounts. If it was voted down by the people present, then the original amounts here would go forward on the ballot. Please.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. I fully understand we can do that. That's not what we're looking to do.
Exactly.
We want to do what we voted for in 2019.
And I think that is something that can be discussed outside of the actual deliberation center session for what we have here. We now know that that is an issue that the town might want to look at outside of this session, and thank you for bringing it up.
Yep.
And as far as the ongoing items we have, if there are people that have issues with amounts in them, please feel free to propose an amendment. And if you think there are people who are not going to vote for something because of something else in there, you can make the motion to see if it will be changed so that you could get what you want and what you think the town wants passed. Thank you very much. Do I have any other comments? Oh, yes, Terry. You can use your own microphone.
Terry Jarvis from Main Street, and I am not speaking as a member of the Budget Committee. I'm speaking as a resident. We did one year separate every single capital reserve fund and expendable trust fund out into their own individual warrant article. Some of you may not have lived in town at that time, because it was about, I'd say, 8-9 years ago. We did that because residents had suggested that it was a better way to do it so they would only vote on one at a time. My phone rang off the hook for a couple of weeks after that town meeting vote. They didn't want it. It was too time consuming. Go back to lumping them. after that, things were lumped together more. And then over the last couple of things are put together almost by topic. Your highway department stuff is put together with your solid waste, because they're both the DPW. Things affecting the fire department and the police department go together because they're both public safety. We tried separating them. It didn't work. I would also have to remind Mr. Bickford, when I first joined the Board of Selectmen, I wanted to do something that the town had voted on, and he then, and many times afterwards, reminded me, the majority of all votes done by the legislative body are advisory to the Board of Selectmen. So even though there was a majority vote to separate out the warrant articles, to separate out the funds, that's an advisory vote. And we seem to be beating this to death every single year. Thank you.
Mr. Bickford?
Yes, your phone may have rung off the hook.
Yell at me, yell at me.
This is an official, oh, that's right.
Thank you.
This
I need that.
is an official warrant article. I doubt very much if you had 234 people call you, I bet you didn't even have 1% of that many. This is an official advisory thing that says we'd like to do it just like all the other towns around us do it. We're not asking for the abnormal, we're just saying we want the normal. And I'll leave it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Oh, okay. All right. All right, we are up to number 6. We're cooking with gas. Oh, wait, 7? Oh, wait. Are you sure you don't want to go over that one again? All right, Article 7. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $65,000 to be placed in previously established public safety-related capital reserve funds as follows, with said funds to come from taxation. Police cruisers, $30,000. FD ancillary equipment, fire department, $5,000. Fire vehicles, $30,000, for a total of $65,000. Ron, would you like to talk about this one?
I can, yes. If anyone has any questions, particularly, just like all the other CRS, the Budget Committee and the Capital Group Committee looked at, they planned this out based on what the department has given them for a life cycle of their equipment, vehicle-wise, and that equipment was then extrapolated out over that many years and how much money they would need each year to be able to purchase that equipment. If anyone's curious about how that works, as we get into that a little bit more. But the Budget Committee probably better off with that. But this is obviously for our police cruisers have increased in costs along with everything else, and the equipment that the fire department is utilizing and needing, all those costs are increasing. So these numbers are a little bit higher than they have been in the past, but I think very justified.
Thank you. Do we have any questions or comments? Okay, thank you very much. Let's go on to Article 8. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $15,000 to be placed in previously established water quality and milfoil-related capital reserve funds as follows, with said funds to come from taxation. New Durham water quality and milfoil treatment, $15,000. Ron, would you like to discuss this one or just make any comments about it before I open it to the floor?
I think this one's pretty straightforward also. Mr. Quimby has done an excellent job and come up with a lot of resources and grants, and a lot of money has been generated by his department, Bridge Committee, and this is actually a much lower number than we had anticipated needing for milfoil and water quality. It was lower down later in the process. So yeah, not a lot of money for what we're doing and what his team is doing to keep the water quality and milfoil in check.
Thank you. Do I have any questions or comments from anyone? Okay, we will go ahead and move on to Article 9. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $40,000 to be placed in previously established facilities-related capital reserve funds as follows, with said funds to come from taxation. Smith Ball Field and Equipment, $5,000. Public Safety Facility, $35,000, for a total of $40,000. Again, Ron, this one's on you. Any comments?
Sure. The Smith Ball Field and Equipment, the rec department has a lot of projects and plans for improving that area to make it more useful for a larger portion of the town. Very small amount of money, I think, to go into that fund for what they're considering, some of their ideas. Trying to think of equipment that can be utilized there, getting into some of the thoughts they've had that could be asked of the department. And the public safety facility, it would be easy to debate that that's not a lot of money, but we need to make improvements to the public safety building. There's a space needs committee that has been resurrected this year, and with that process will continue. I anticipate it will, whether I'm on a select board or not. And yeah, we need to make some improvements in the public safety building. It's pretty obvious.
Thank you. Do I have any questions or comments from anyone present? Okay, thank you very much. Let's go ahead and move on to Article 10. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $5,000 to be placed in previously established facilities related capital reserve funds as follows, with said funds to come from taxation. 1772 Meeting House restoration, $5,000. Does anyone want to speak to that, or we just want to open that up to the floor?
Either way.
Go for it.
I don't want to say anything to be contentious in this subject.
Oh, come on, come on.
No, obviously the meeting house, we've seen a lot of improvements this year in the meeting house committee, and a lot of great progress, a lot of growth. There's been a lot of effort put in by some new members to that team. In the past, even when I was on the budget committee, we were apprehensive about donating money to a cause that wasn't seeing any return on that investment, and the lackluster effort. So, yeah, I think it's there's been a lot of money put into that. CRF, I don't have the number in front of me, we can get that if somebody wants to see it, put into that restoration committee, the meeting house restoration in the past. There's still a substantial amount of money. We realize they still need a lot more money. And we're on the path to getting that, I think, with their efforts and the town's efforts through taxation. And yeah, please keep donating clothes to the, what do we call that, shack, den at the solid waste facility.
Thank you. Would anyone like to make a comment from the public? Okay, thank you very much. Let's go on to Article 11. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $20,000 to be placed in previously established expendable trust funds as follows, with said funds to come from taxation. Town building and improvements, $20,000. Okay, this is Swen's. I have you listed.
Yeah, just very quickly, this expendable trust fund is fairly obvious in its description, but it does go for repairs, security systems, projects, maintenance projects that may be above and beyond the normal, that things that we may not foresee, heating system failure, etc., septic system failure. So this is what this particular expendable trust fund goes to.
Thank you. Do you have any questions or comments from the public? Yes. State your name and address, please.
My name is Rudy Rosiello. I'm speaking as a resident, not a budget committee member. I live at Elm Mill Road. My question to the chair is, these corrections are the ones that were found in the space needs studies, which were violations of safety hazards, or are these other of that, or is that included in this number?
Mr. Swenson?
Yeah, anything other than might be normal routine, but many of those that were pointed out in that would come from this fund, yes, or could come from this fund.
Any other questions or comments? Okay. Let's go on to Article 12. To To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $40,000 to be placed in previously established expendable trust funds as follows, with said funds to come from taxation. Computer systems and office equipment, $20,000. Records management, $5,000. Accrued benefits liability, $15,000. For a total of $40,000. Swens, I think you are on the hook for this one also.
Yeah, again, they're very descriptive in terms of the title of each one of those. Perhaps one I want to address for a little bit more explanatory information is accrued benefits liability. We have not funded that, I don't think, in the last year. But because of administrative departures and other longer-term employee departures, even some short-term employee departures in the last year and a half, due to either finding a different job, such as the former TA, or resignations, such as the town clerk. They build up paid time off, PTO, which goes a little bit beyond, it's a one-time payment that goes a little bit beyond the ongoing accrued amounts that may be there. So those kinds of liabilities, or benefit liabilities, come from that accrued benefit liability ETF, and it does need some replenishing, given we have not funded it for a year or so.
Thank you. Any comments or questions from the public on this one? Okay. The next one that we're looking at is Article 13, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $7,500 for the purposes of funding contributions to health and other agencies, i.e. Cornerstone VNA, CAPS, Kingswood Youth Center, Haven, and Stratford Nutrition, Meals on Wheels, with this sum to come from authorizing the withdrawal of $7,500 from the J.C. Shirley Timber Trust, Trust Fund number 28. Said trust established for the purpose to benefit the town of New Durham for such lawful purposes as the town may direct at its annual meeting. Cecile, do you have any comments on this one before I open it to the floor?
I actually do.
Thank you.
So I appreciate the other selectmen allowing me to speak to this article because those organizations are very close to my heart. They provide much needed services to our residents who can least afford it and are most in need. I can tell you that the Kingswood Youth Center provides invaluable services to those young people, many of our own New Durham students who, without their assistance, would not be successful through high school and beyond. Meals on Wheels, VNA, we know what they do for our elderly citizens. So several years ago, in our discussions as a select board, we talked about how to fund that and was it really fair to expect all the residents of New Durham to support charitable giving. So we looked at alternative funding sources, and there are trust funds that are left to the town. And John C. Shirley was a very generous resident of New Durham that left a lot of money and property for the betterment of the community. And those funds aren't there to be saved, they're to be used. So in support of John C. Shirley's mission of supporting programs in the town, we decided that it would be appropriate to fund donations to those organizations through his trust fund. And I'm sure he would be very proud to know his funds are being used in those manners.
Thank you, Cecile. Do I have any questions or comments from anyone attending? Okay, thank you, Cecile. Article 14, by petition of 25 or more eligible voters of the town of New Durham, New Hampshire, to see if the town will increase the veterans tax credit from $500 to $750 to include future amendments to the RSA 7228. The optional all veterans tax credit upon adoption by city or town pursuant to RSA 7227-A shall be an amount for $500 up to $750. The optional tax credit for all veterans shall replace the standard tax credit in its entirety and shall be not in addition thereto. Wendy Zimmerman, are you present, and would you like to have the floor?
Yeah, I just want to be really brief. Sorry.
State your address also, please.
I'm on 237 Kings Highway. Aside from the obvious, the state actually increased the tax credit from 500 to 750. It was addressed back in 2019, and it was not gone forward with, so I decided that I was going to see if I could get some support to bring it and increase it to the 750. They wrote the blank check. We can write one. We can help support them back. If anybody has any questions, it's equivalent to less than a tip for a cup of coffee a day. It's like 18 cents a day is what it would equivalent to if you did that, doing the math.
Could you come up to the microphone and identify yourself, please, sir?
Hi, Scott Drummond, 362 Old Bay Road. Just a clarifying question, you say that the legislature increased the tax credit from 500 up to 750, but the townspeople never changed that, so you're doing that tonight.
Yes.
Now, you're also saying that in the future...
Please address that.
No. You're saying in the future, if the RSA's change, it'll automatically be increased? Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions or comments from the floor? Okay, Article 14 is also from Wendy. By petition of 25 or more eligible voters of the town of New Durham, New Hampshire, to see if the town will increase the veterans tax credit from $500. Oh, sorry, I missed it. I told you, screw it up. Article 15, sorry. By petition of 25 or more eligible voters of the town of New Durham, New Hampshire, to see if the town will increase the Veterans Service-Connected Total Disability Tax Credit from $1,400 to $4,000 to include future amendments to the RSA 7235, the optional tax credit for a service-connected total disability upon adoption by a city or town pursuant to RSA 7227A shall be an amount from $701 up to $4,000. The optional tax credit for service-connected total disability shall replace the standard tax credit in its entirety and shall not be in addition thereto. Wendy, would you like to make a comment?
Wendy Zimmerman, 237 Kings Highway. The biggest thing that I really want to make sure, seems like it's a huge jump, but what it does, it eliminates the all veterans tax credit, so it's only the service-connected disability credit. So it wouldn't be able to be stacked anymore by doing the increase. And with the number of eligible properties currently at 6, it's less than 4 cents a day. So I'm a huge veteran advocate. And then veterans that are 100% total disability, unemployable. Somebody had made the comment that they were getting rich on that, that somebody would get rich on this. There's a lot when it gets involved with veterans that's 100% disabled for not only them, but their family and their caregivers and doctor's appointments and stuff. So they do take quite a burden by having that determination. Any other questions?
Thank you. Anyone making a comment? I'd like to recognize myself. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Cecile. You first. You're more important. Please.
No. I'm asking this as a resident because I have not been involved in any of this. Is there a financial application that has to be filed?
Go ahead, Wendy.
Wendy Zimmerman, 237 Kings Highway. There's not. It's to get the service-connected disability is a long, lengthy process, and when they determine that you are 100% disabled, if they haven't determined you to be unemployable, you're really not capable of working once you get the 100% unemployability. The all veterans tax credit is totally different. I don't know which one you were speaking to.
So I was speaking to this one.
Yeah.
I was wondering
Yeah.
if
you're at 100%
needs-based.
Yeah, it's not needs-based, but if you're at the 100% total permanent unemployable, you're not making any other income.
Okay, so it is based on lack of employment.
It's based on lack of ability. A really bad word, but lack of being able to work because you have physical or mental challenges that prevent you from doing so.
Thank you.
Anyone else want to speak? I'd like to recognize myself. My stepfather was 100% disabled from the Navy, and it was the fact, one of the facts, the Veterans Administration helped him get a home for us to live in, and beyond that, he received a tax abatement for the house, and it was in perpetuity, so that when he died, and my mother, who had been taking care of him all those years, that money went to make sure she could stay in her home as long as she wanted to. So I just wanted to say that I think it is well worth it. Even those that are able to work, a lot of times it is at a diminished capacity, and it is very hard to make sure that they can support their families. So I think it's a wonderful thing, in my opinion, as a voter. Okay, any other comments or questions? Okay, is Mike Chalinas here? Okay, do you want me to read the article, or do you want to do it, or do you just want to?
I'll just hit the highlights.
Okay, there are 3 separate articles, so we'll take them one at a time. The first one is Article 16, about map 209, lot 46 off Kings Highway.
Dave, I did separate the articles. So, the Kings Highway lot, it's a 54-acre lot. Right now, it's got little value because the road's not built up. Shaw's Pond has very little water flows through it. The more we can protect it, the more the ones that do live there are going to enjoy it. The main reason I put it in is just for water quality. I'm a firm believer that you're putting 1 or 2 kids in a subdivision, you're going to lose more money than you're gaining by taking a piece out. The town owns it by tax deed. You don't get that every day. It's on the water. I just thought it was a good idea to put it out there to see if the town wants to protect it while they actually own it.
Okay, thank you, and you can stay here. So.
Yep.
Do I have any questions or comments from the floor? Okay, I'm going to take Terry first because you've talked a lot tonight. So if you would back up from the microphone, we'll go ahead and have Terry. Oh, actually, she's going to use her own, so go ahead, Terry.
Terry Jarvis, and as previously, I'm speaking as a resident. If this article should pass, what would be the process if the Board of Selectmen wanted to put it into a conservation easement? Or would the passage of this article prohibit that?
Go ahead, Mike.
I don't know that. I don't know. At the very most they'd have to do is come back before the town to ask the town to vote to do it. If we vote to protect it, the town will be voting to release it. Whereas if it stays on the tax roll, the 3 selectmen have the choice, and whose selectmen down the road could have a different opinion than the ones that are there now. You know, you don't know. So I just thought you put it out there that the people of the town would have a choice. It makes it a little more complicated because they can't sell it, you know, short term. All they have to do is wait till the following year and go back before the town. You say, I want to sell it for conservation land. Done. I'll put an easement on it.
Okay, Terry, legal counsel has a comment before you ask another question. Do you want to see what the...
I would like an answer because at one time there was a major move to put that lot into a conservation easement.
I think the gentleman who spoke to it actually is right on target. The town owns it, so you own it. So if you want to encumber it by restricting it through a conservation easement, that can be done, and we come back to the town to determine that you wanted to burden it that way, so.
Mr. Quickly, Moderator Cowan,
Yes?
if I could comment maybe in response to Terry's question. It definitely would take that away, and in fact, this petition article does not place this into conservation. It only takes it into the town's ownership.
Go ahead.
Kenneth Banjoy, talking as a taxpayer. When I purchased up there on Kings Highway, right on Shaw's Pond, our real estate agent had told us that across from us was always going to be a tree farm, that the land was donated to the town. I don't know if there's records of it or anything, but that's what we were told by our real estate.
I'm pretty sure you're gonna find that's incorrect. It was taken by tax deed, and it could be sold by the selectmen at any time. So if you live there, you realize how sensitive that little body of water is.
Yes.
And by my feeling, this is my biggest thing I saw, if you protect that piece, it's going to make it where a developer, because once that is out of the equation, they never build a road up enough to do a development out there. So if we protect this piece, which is a lot of the road frontage, water frontage, it's, my opinion was a good move, and I just thought it was a chance of a lifetime to a brother.
1 second, sir.
Maureen Neff, 336A Kings Highway. I believe this is the piece of property directly across from my house.
Yes.
It used to be called Mackenzie's land,
Yes.
and it was taken. And it's now the town owns it. It's very steep, it's very cliffy, so I don't think that it's really developable. But would this be the time to amend this to make it conservation at this time? Would you consider that?
Ashley?
Actually, I think
Let's have the pros.
the one thing you can't do is change the subject matter of a warrant, and I think, arguably, I think that changes the subject matter because it doesn't provide notice to the people who might want to come to talk about that. You certainly can do it next time.
Okay, then I'll be here.
You have homework.
I do.
Thank you. Do you like to make another comment? Or David, did you have a comment you wanted to make? I shut you off first and then everyone came in. Do you have something to say? And then I'll recognize Janice.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Yes, Sue, that's right, we can't
Mr.
modify.
Bickford, say who you are. Say who you
Oh,
are.
I understand. Okay,
No.
I'm David Becker, if you hadn't already noticed.
It's for the minutes. We want to make sure that when they do the minutes, they know who's talking.
No,
Thank you.
that's a good idea. Right, I know the selectmen have been aggressively, up until this year, selling off tax-deeded property. But there is another category, which is town-owned property, which the selectmen have never been given authority. It's been asked before here at in a warrant article before, but we've turned them down. But a lot of people don't understand the difference. The difference is the tax deed now, the selectmen can sell it at any time they wish without asking the body. And the town-owned property has to come back to the legislative body, which is the town meeting or the official ballot, as we do now, SB2. And so we felt that that would be at least a stumbling block, instead of just selling it right off to get some revenue out of it. It's really worth reconsideration of that. So far, we've been fortunate. It hasn't hit the chopping block, but by rights, every year, the selectmen are supposed to consider it for selling off. And so anyway, that's what we want to do, is just hold it up a little bit.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Janice, did you want to say something?
Janice Santhees, 103 Meterboro Road. I think Dave Bickford answered my question, and my question is, if we vote yes to these warrant articles about the tax deeded farm or whatever, is that going to be an advisory? Or are the selectmen bound then to not sell that property?
That's quite the deterrent.
Legal counsel is going to step in.
No, that's not advisory. And anytime the town is going to accept or sell town land, it has to come to the legislature, which is you. So, for instance, with a right-of-way, same thing, an easement, same thing. If that would be giving a property right, and that is the town that decides.
Any other questions or comments on this one? Okay. So we did 16, and so I guess Jones Pond, Article 17 is the next one. This is regarding map 243, lot 009, and map 243, lot 009-19 for future Jones Pond boat access. Mr. Dulines.
Yeah, I don't know if anybody's familiar. Over the years, me and others have put in the boat landing right below the fish hatchery. And we did the one on Downing Pond, which will be the next article. The town actually has from tax deed one on Jones's Pond. I personally, I believe the reason it's tax deeded is because it's not really a suitable building site. Every place we used to fish as kids, no trespassing. There's fences, there's gates. This is a chance where we could have, I'm not talking a major boat landing, it's just like we did on Downing, it's just something you put your canoe in. You'd have to park across the street more than likely, and it'd only be like 3 or 4 cars. It's not a big one. But it's an opportunity. I saw the opportunity, I just thought we ought to put it before the voters to see if we ought to keep it or not, you know. It's, if they approve it, the last 2, the town put very little money into, and if they approve it, we'll do it all with volunteer again, just like we did the other 2. I firmly believe that it's recreation. It's not heavily used, but I love seeing the kids enjoy it. I love seeing the families go out there in the kayaks and canoes and the fishermen. And I just think it's getting harder and harder to find a spot to get onto the water. And we have an opportunity. I'd like to see it.
Tell where it is, okay.
It's, you know where the old, the bridges that goes across Jones's Pond. There's about a half an acre, and it's got a brook going through it on the opposite side of the road, and it's less than 1/10 of an acre, I think, on the water. You know, it's an opportunity we have. I can't see the town ever buying a piece of property to do it, so if we're going to do it, it's time to look at it and see if we're going to save it.
Thank you. Any comments or questions? Cecile?
I just wanted to comment and thank Mike for the work that he did on Downing's Pond and Marsh Pond boat access. And he's absolutely right. It was minimal cost to the town, and it opened up 2 very valuable access points to those bodies of water.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, last but not least is Article 18, map 250, lot 016 at 50 Main Street, also known as Downing Pond Boat Access. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, Downing Pond boat access is already done. I wouldn't say it's heavily used, but I think that lot looks pretty nice now. Russ Weldon, myself, and a bunch of others went in and cleaned it up. Got a nice little boat ramp there. I see people using it. I see people eating their lunch there. And I'd hate to see it sold. So if any of the 3 are most important to me, I think that one being already done absolutely should be town property, and I hope that would go along.
Thank you, sir. Any comments? Thank you very much, Mike, for all the work that you put in. We know a lot of people are enjoying everything that you put your efforts into. I know we're wrapping this up. You guys are good. Thank you. Okay, are there any other questions or comments that anyone thinks that we should have addressed tonight that I forgot about or skipped over or just got too excited to know? Okay. Okay, I just want to add a couple comments before we end our session. Please check with the town website and public notice spaces for the upcoming candidates night, time and place. Right now it is scheduled for Wednesday, 2 March at 6:30 p.m. in the evening at the community center. That's for all you guys who are going to go to, take part in town, get on that ballot, going to have a great time. Also, please take a look. Excuse me?
What day?
It is Wednesday evening, March 2nd at 6:30 p.m. in the community center. We were going to have it a different night, but some other people couldn't make it, and they thought they were important enough for us to change it, so we did. Also, please take a look at the open positions on the ballot. Many of our committees and boards are looking for a few good people. And write-ins are encouraged on election day. Would love to see some fresh faces supporting the town. I would encourage anyone to attend and watch the live streams of the various meetings and see if there's some town committee you would be interested in and contribute your unique knowledge and perspective. If there's nothing else, I will close this evening's deliberative session. Go ahead.
I can just make a plug for a couple of things. Obviously, voting day is March 8th. Polls are open 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. Encourage you all to go out and vote. Appreciate all that participated in the deliberative session tonight. I think it's very informative and useful. The voter guide will be updated from whatever things happened tonight. The voter guide that is currently there was a pre-deliberative voter guide. I don't know if there's going to be a whole lot of changes given what I've understood tonight, but there will be a few wording changes and make sure that we understand this after the deliberative session, and that will be on the website available to the public. Similarly, I think the slides that were presented are also available to the public off the website.
Okay. If there's nothing else, then I'll close this evening's deliberative session, and I want to once again thank all of those present for their time and input, and I hope this was helpful for those who are in attendance, either in person or those who may watch later remotely. We look forward to seeing you all on voting day, Tuesday, March 8th, here at the New Durham School from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. I'm sorry you guys aren't going to be able to sit in your car in your jammies this year when you go to vote. You're just going to have to get dressed and get out of the car. So again, thank you very much for attending, and Terry and Swen, you can go ahead and do any housekeeping you need to do on your meetings. Thank you everyone very much for attending.